next.
I'll cut red tape. Cutting red tape. Clearing away the red tape.
A popular promise during the president's State of the Union address, but is the government actually creating, not cutting, more costly red tape? We report, you decide.
I'll cut red tape. Cutting red tape. Clearing away the red tape. And we'll cut through red tape. Eliminate more regulations.
Promising to make it easier and cheaper to do business. This has been a common theme during the president's State of the Union addresses and other speeches, but so far this young year, the federal government already issuing nearly 1,800 new or altered regulations. So, Steve, is this just another empty promise from the president?
Yeah, empty promise is a polite word for it. In his first 2 years in office, he passed in terms of big regulations, costing the economy more than $100 million a year, 6 times as many as George W. Bush. So he's crushing the economy with new regulations. It's now cost the economy $2 trillion a year, which is bigger than most of the other economies in the world.
Well, Rick, talk is cheap, but regulations are expensive. Actually, to put a precise number on it, it's close to $2 trillion. We have a $1.8 trillion, but however you cut it, it costs a lot of money, all these regs.
You know, they can, but here's the problem that I have, David. We broaden out these definitions, and people can be pretty badly misled. If folks go over to regulation.gov and you look at what's actually happened so far this year, you know what you discover? These aren't new regulations that were passed that we're referencing. They're notices of potential changes. They're sending them out for comment because that's always part of the process. Many of them are regulations.
Rick, hold on a second. Rick, I'm sorry, I got to interrupt because it's not quite true what you're saying. There are 141 regulations in the first 3 days of the administration. 119 of those were so-called rulemaking. That is completely new rules and regs.
They were rulemaking regulations, but they weren't ones that were passed as of yet. They've gone out for notice. They've gone out for comment. It's not like in the first 3 days of the year we suddenly signed off on all these regulations, and that makes a big difference.
Mike
not all of them
Ozanian
will become regulations.
Mike
Also,
Ozanian, the fact is that these are not minor things. These are things that cost businesses money. Some of them are huge, like Obamacare, and some of them are incredibly petty. You talk to the Gibson Guitar Company, or think of incandescent light bulbs being outlawed, things like that. I mean, they add up, don't they?
Well, not only that, yes, you're right. But to Rick's own point, I think he makes the case why there are too many regulations, even if they're not yet passed, Rick. Just imagine being a small business owner. Small businesses create the bulk of the jobs in this country. You're trying to figure out whether to hire more people, invest more capital, expand, or start a new business. How are you supposed to know what the landscape's like? How are you supposed to know whether you're going to earn a return? You don't even know, basically, by what you're saying, what the rules and regulations are going to be.
Rich Karlgaard, you spent your life focusing on startups and new young companies and entrepreneurs. How do they face these regs?
Well, Oz has it exactly right. You know, in addition to and Steve, too, in addition to the $100 billion of new regulatory costs in 2013, we have 160 million hours of more paperwork. Now, this means that companies, startups have to hire compliance officers, accountants, and lawyers rather than engineers and salespeople. And this is why, you know, this is having a tangible effect on the economy and why we're growing at a substandard growth rate.
And Sabrina, the quantity of this stuff is just amazing. The pile on. We don't need all this stuff, do we?
No, we're absolutely a regulation nation. And one thing that Oz mentioned that's so important is that a lot of times the big corporations are the ones who can absorb the cost. I know the Manufacturers Alliance it considers a major regulation one that costs $100 million in compliance costs. Well, it's one thing for Walmart to absorb that, but a smaller competitor simply cannot, which pushes them out of the marketplace. So it really distorts the market, creates fewer, less competition for consumers, and drives up prices overall.
And Bill Baldwin, it's the work rules that really hit hardest, isn't it?
I think the government should stop harassing employers with, for example, the regulation that makes it illegal to look at criminal records when you're hiring, or, for another example, that lawsuit against Consolidated Coal. You know what they did wrong? They put in a hand scanner at the job site check-in, and one employee complained that the hand scanner was, quote, the mark of the beast and a symbol of the Antichrist. So they couldn't do it.
Now, I want to throw out a bone to Rick here and go to Steve with this, because there was recently the contamination of the water in West West Virginia, where this coal company, a refiner company, which was doing a terrible job, really polluted the waters. Very dangerous situation. So there are some moments when you really need regulation. The problem is all these other regulations just dilute the ones that we really need.
Yeah, you need rules of the road. You need clean water and the like. You could do that with about a tenth of the regulations we have today. The EPA, for example, is going after to close down the eastern coal industry and are now waging war on wood-burning stoves. Take that, Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
And these guys don't know where to stop.
Rick, isn't that the point? There is certainly a need to keep people safe, keep their drinking water safe, etc. Aren't you concerned that with this excess of regulations that we have now in this nation, that we're diluting the ones that we really need?
Yeah, you've heard me say it before, David. I, too, agree that we do have over-regulation because once you hire a person to regulate, they're not going to likely stop and give up their job when they've done the main thing. But we do mislead when we don't point out to people, look, if people will go and look, small businessmen, at those 1,100 regulations that have been proposed, you're going to be stunned to see how they don't apply to you in any way, shape, or form. It's Arkansas.
They're applying to more and more people. Actually, you know, you're wrong because my wife does have a little business, and we just had a bunch of regulations thrown at us. Mike Ozanian,
like
last word.
furniture makers that after every coat of lacquer have to send it out for inspection, Rick. Come on, what is that? That's nonsense. We complain about we're not manufacturing enough here, yet we're passing more and more regulations to kill manufacturing in this country.
All right, we got to do something.
And it's not through Congress, right? Regulation without representation.
Last word, Sabrina, coming up.